To recline or not to recline? That is the question among many other new ones that you should be asking yourself now that we're all getting back to traveling on airplanes after COVID.
The answer is please don't recline if I'm behind you. Travel expert Jen Weatherhead joins us now with a lesson in post-pandemic travel etiquette. Jen, isn't it always rude to recline?
You know, I actually think that it's not that rude if you do it thoughtfully. So there is a difference. I think you need to double check. You need to make sure that someone doesn't have their tray, table out and they don't have their laptop, they don't have a baby behind them or sitting on their lap. Just kind of think about it a little bit more because people are going to recline. The seats are able to recline, so as long as they're able to recline, people will do it. But I say do it thoughtfully and always bring your chair up during meal times. That's a key factor.
Yes, and give a heads up. I think that's important too. Make sure you ask permission. I always try to do that. Jen, tell us about some travel etiquette rules that we may not be aware of post-pandemic that you think people should keep in mind.
Yeah, so it's just a little bit different. I mean, obviously right now we want to make sure that we are following all of the guidelines, especially the ones that the airlines and airports have put in place. So you want to make sure that you're masking up when you need to and you're doing so properly. You want to make sure that you're also maintaining that physical distance whenever they're asking you to. Sometimes that can be a little bit tricky in an airport. You don't want to huddle around the gate too much. And then another thing I would say is you want to make sure you're sanitizing all the time. And finally, be kind. I mean, what a year we've all been through. We're all dying to get on those vacations. We need that mental break. So just be kind and be patient as we're all kind of navigating and getting back into this world of traveling again. Some of us may have forgotten some of the things we need to do. So just be a little bit more patient.
Jen, I think this next topic I always thought was the unspoken rule. You just don't bring it up because it's a long flight sometimes. How do you feel about shoes being on or off on the plane?
You know what? This totally reminds me of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, that scene when Del takes his shoes off and Neil is just not having it. I'm a fan of keeping your shoes on during the flight for sanitary reasons. It's not always the cleanest environment on a plane. It's also a public space. It's not your private space. You have to keep that in mind. And a definite no-no is when you put your feet with shoes or without socks on someone else's armrest or in someone else's space. That's definitely a no-no.
Yes, we fully agree with that. Speaking of armrest, it's always like if you're sitting in the middle, are you entitled to both of those armrests? Are both of those yours?
Those are yours. And you need to stake claim to those as soon as you sit down. Because if you think about it, the middle seat is kind of arguably one of the worst seats on the plane already. And if someone in the aisle or next to the window also takes those armrests, the middle seat has nowhere to go. They're really quite squished in there. So the middle seat gets the armrest, and make sure you stake claim to those as soon as you sit down, and just makes things a little bit more comfortable for everyone involved.
That's a good point. There's got to be some perk to getting the middle seat. And here it is. You have two armrests instead of just one.
You paid your dues.
Yeah.
You served your time. Jen, I want to circle back to something that we talked about earlier in the show, because Maggie and I were having this discussion earlier. Do you think it's okay to put your personal item, not your carry-on, which is usually a suitcase, your little backpack, in the overhead compartment? What do you think?
So I think if you can put it under the seat, you really should, because so many people are doing carry-on luggage these days, and they need to have that extra space when you have it in the overhead bin. So definitely, if you can put it under your seat, do that. I understand people want to have a little bit more foot space, but what I would say, if you are going to put it in the overhead bin and you've seen that someone is struggling trying to get their carry-on suitcase up there because there's not enough space, be a nice person and offer to take it down and put it underneath your seat.
Absolutely. And lastly, Jen, when boarding or deplaning, what rules should we keep in mind? Because I don't like the guy who races from the back of the plane and stands and blocks my way out as soon as that ding goes off.
I know, exactly. That always happens, doesn't it? But the rule here is when you are boarding the plane, you want to make sure that you're following the zones and the rows as they are called. You don't want to be huddling around at the gate. That just causes more confusion and more delays, and especially during this time, during the pandemic, you don't want to be doing that. When it comes to getting off of the plane, you want to go row by row with the row that is at the closest to the door first. So unless you're instructed otherwise, as in someone may have a very tight connection and the flight attendant has said, anyone on this flight, please allow them to go first. You want to make sure you're going row by row. Otherwise, it gets really clogged up, and it just delays everyone in the process.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Jen.